Welcome. This is Glenn, and you're listening to Wild Earth Conversations. Wild Earth Conversations is about engaging thoughtful individuals in meaningful conversations that connect their interests and insights to the vision of a thriving and beautiful planet. My guest today is Eric Niederkruger, who has been involved in a host of worthwhile causes in Grand Junction over the last 3 decades, such as homelessness, anti-war organizing, and environmental struggles. I will begin by asking Eric general questions concerning his activism, then turn to specific issues that are especially important to him and to the rest of us. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What first motivated you to get involved in activism, and how did it begin for you locally?
Starting out as a young person, the date 22nd of April 1970 was the very first Earth Day. And I lived in the Bay Area by Oakland, California. And we had a huge Earth Day response. It was the very first one. It was a lot of fun. And it was billed as a teach-in. And so that was the primary goal of that first one. And so that's where I got started. And then out here, I had started doing some work with the homeless when I was with an anarchist collective. But for the most part, early 2003, we got involved with anti-war activity.
How has the community changed over the past 30 years as a result of activism, yours and others?
Well, there's definitely a lot of others. Activism in the Valley started for me, again, 2003. We were also fighting ICE at that time with illegal evictions. But activism locally for me started out when I first moved here dealing with homelessness. But I soon moved into an anarchist collective, and we were working with some of the original Abolish ICE and anti-war activities. There's a book that came out during that time called Red State Radicals. And the collective was mentioned in that book talking about how the state was being dragged purple on the western slope. They really took note of it. And here, we're still about purple, but the rest of the state turned blue.
What has been the biggest obstacle in sustaining activism over the decades?
Oh, I think burnout is definitely the number one thing that keeps things from getting done. When you are not paid to be an activist and you're a citizen activist, you have to set aside extra time, and it's the 2-job thing can really wear you down. Plus, the Scooby snacks aren't always there right away, and it takes some time, and some people are impatient with it.
What mistakes do you think activists, yourself included, make? And what would you do differently in hindsight?
Well, as far as mistakes go, I would say that one of the biggest things I've learned is not taking for granted that you know what the other side is saying if you aren't engaged in conversation with the other side. And you also want to look at people not necessarily as the other side, because right there you set up a dichotomy and set up for conflict. But I try more now to listen to people, what they're actually saying, and it's difficult. It's really a skill. I'm learning it.
How do you see the relationship between local struggles and larger national issues?
We have a lot of poverty here in the valley, and that ends up with a lot of damage that's done to our society. But it's also it's a state issue and it's a national issue. Most everything we do on the national level has impact on the local level, especially with environmentalism, because we all have to breathe, eat, and yeah, I would say that's it.
How important, if at all, do you regard electoral politics?
Well, Che Guevara said that as long as there's any shred of a chance that you can change things through politics, you got to give it a try. The same deal is applied for us. You got to give it a try.
I believe you self-identify as an anarchist.
Yes.
Could you give us a short statement of what this means to you?
Anarchy to me means the utmost in personal responsibility. You're not looking for anybody to come in and bail you out, correct you. You take total personal responsibility for your actions, good and bad, and that's the start of it. The other deal you look at is community needs and getting plugged in where the community needs it, not where you necessarily want to take it.
How do you think younger activists today differ from when you first started?
Well, in general, there's a lot less violence at demonstrations that we have now. There was a whole lot of head cracking in the 60s and 70s. Of course, 4 people were slain in Ohio State or Kent State University in Ohio for protesting the Vietnam War. And so I think we're better off now than we were then. But also, we've got the naivety beat out of us. And I think they see that.
What advice would you give to people first beginning to get involved in environmental and community issues?
First thing is show up. Can't do anything if you don't show up. And so if you're getting started, you can put up a bulletin board at the library down around town. But you got to have people to work with, and you got to be prepared to get going as a team. So, yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest.
Looking ahead, what do you see as the most pressing issue for our community in the next decade?
Well, it happens. And I think we're going to start seeing not just human feces, but our waste in general is running out of places to go. And I imagine we'll be overrun in garbage pretty soon, like that big plastic swab in the Pacific Ocean. So I could see that happening. I could definitely see air getting worse. My instincts are basically food, water, shelter, keeping it clean. And you wouldn't think it would be controversial to be for all that, but it is. Some people don't believe the government should be involved in it.
What gives you hope that meaningful change is possible?
Well, I've seen meaningful change. Again, not trying to be the boy when I was your age, but black people were treated much worse back then. Trans people had no respite anywhere, let alone gay people. And if you're against the war, you're even further out of line.
Let's turn to the specific tragedy of homelessness. What do you think are the root causes of homelessness in our community?
Well, I see an awful lot of people that got a bad break that anybody could get. And our society is not very forgiving of that. You lose a step, you lose your house, you lose your job, you lose your family. So when you're looking at our homeless people, many of them do work, but they work at jobs that pay $11.75 an hour, very low wages, and they can't afford to eat and take care of their needs and get a house at the same time. And so that's kind of the situation we're in now.
Do you think that UBI, a basic universal income or universal basic income, would significantly help with the issue of homelessness?
Well, fortunately, there's an example in place in Denver, Boulder. They gave $500 a month to chronically homeless people. And you know what the number one thing they spent their money on? Bills. People that are wanting to claw back into society and they know they're going to need a credit rating or get lights turned on if they get that new house. And so that's pretty much it.
Are things getting better or worse in our community?
Yes. I would say they're getting better and worse.
Could you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I think they're better because I see a lot of people on the street corners now doing protests and demonstrations. Back when we got started with the anti-war, we had people throwing full cans of beer at us, or one of our photographers at one of the anti-war events got punched in the face with his camera, black in his eye. So that level of entanglement isn't as common as it used to be. And you wanted to know what was
worse? What's gotten better and what's gotten worse?
What's gotten worse is dialogue has broken down. People are very tribal nowadays, and I think, just in my opinion, we have one party, the Uniparty, and it serves to steer everybody towards the status quo. And I see right now, when they get us to fight each other, they win. You know, your enemy should not just be a guy with a Porsche in his garage or a Mercedes in his garage, but a guy who owns a factory that makes Porsches and garages. That's what I believe in strongly, is punch up. Not even sideways, but you need to reach up and connect with the people that are pulling the strings.
And what's gotten better?
I would say there's more open space for people to be themselves. I mean, as far as just one example would be trans people, there is finally a place where they're feeling comfortable to come out. And I'm seeing lately a lot of different groups are coming together for different purposes that wouldn't normally run together. So I don't know. We got one foot in the graveyard and one on the bus.
What are the most effective approaches for dealing with homelessness?
Well, one thing that was supposed to happen here back in 2010 when we had the Coalition for the Unhoused Housing Development Program, we we're supposed to go with a model called Housing First. And Housing First gets a bad name because in the bigger cities, they didn't do a very good job at all about maintaining the program. And it's real frustrating for me to see people complaining about paying for the homeless, but at the same time, I've seen a lot of it get wasted. I would say that at a minimum, we see the city get engaged in developing housing. You know, we don't have our own bus stations. We don't have our own housing programs. You always ask, where's the money going to come from? Well, we're spending money. We're spending money every time somebody has to get a 911 call or go to the emergency room, or when you put people in jail, people say, jail them up. Well, that's probably the worst thing you could do because it's expensive. So you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. So probably continuing to talk about housing is the most important thing. We have a group called the Coalition for the Homeless here. It has upwards of 60 groups in it. They do not work very much with housing at all. They deal with housing services. And so we end up with a focus on having good services at the expense of having housing.
What do you think of the strategy of housing first?
Well, I think housing first is the way to go, and I'll tell you why. If you were not an addict, alcoholic, or mentally ill when you became homeless, you increase your odds exponentially of all three of them. If you are already a addict, alcoholic, or mentally ill, it's going to make it worse. There's no problem that gets solved by making people sleep outside in the winter. Housing First is the program that puts people directly in housing, sight unseen, and you're going to have some cracked smags. You know, there's going to be some that don't work out that well. But what won't work is just throwing a bunch of money at the problem and letting an outsider come in and consult for us.
So how does this idea work? Is anyone that is homeless given a key to a house or a an apartment somewhere that they can use or not use? Tell us a little bit about how it actually works.
Well, there's lots of levels to it. At the beginning, we're going to have a lot of what's called congregate shelters. Shelters where there's many people that are sleeping together in a dorm room type setting. That would be something along the lines of the homeless shelter with capacity. The homeless shelter can't even begin to touch the amount of homeless people we have in the valley. And so getting back to the basics of housing doesn't mean you're going to get your own apartment right away. You'd probably go into an aggregate house and then like a halfway house if you make your way through that program. And then if you're still around, you have the opportunity to get into subsidized housing. So it's every bit incremental as you go along. I don't think it's a good idea just to give people keys. I think that's a setup for failure. I think we need both. We have good services here. We just don't have the housing people. But if we got people into housing and our services were still up and running, we'd have a lot better results.
What do you say to those who see homelessness mainly as a policing issue?
Well, America's taught law and order, and so that's not an uncommon paradigm. Is we'll go ahead and we'll get the cops on you. It's definitely a social problem. It's like I said earlier, with people that are not addicts or alcoholics, they can definitely develop that just being out on the street. And so when you call in the police, again, that is the most expensive. So if you want people to say you want to punish the homeless, don't call the police because you're punishing yourself. And so, yeah, those are things that go through my mind.
If local officials were willing to listen, what is the single most important policy change you would urge them to make?
Designate an area for sanctioned camping.
And why do you
Um,
make that the top priority?
Because that can fill the housing bill right away. A lot of people that are sleeping rough or sleeping out in tents year round have to move their camps in the middle of the winter because they get busted. Well, with the sanctioned camping, you have a place where people can lay their hat right away. You have a patch of land, and a lot of these people are used to camping out. So sleeping outdoors, it's better for them to have a place where they would not get kicked out of just by their very presence. And we probably need a couple of sanctioned camping areas. One thing that would do is really help people with the perception that the homeless are everywhere. The homeless are indeed all through the valley. We have probably a couple thousand homeless people here, and they're going to be seen. And people don't want them to be by the river. They don't want them out in the desert. They don't want them in their neighborhood. They don't want them in the parks. It all comes down, they have to go somewhere, because can't stress it enough, policing the homeless is dead end and its most expensive choice.
How strong is the connection between the homeless and veterans in Grand Junction?
Well, definitely you see two marginalized communities. We have a lot of homeless vets. One thing that is taken off is the VA has a program with housing vouchers from different landlords that will take a homeless vet. It makes a difference to them. And so that has come up recently, and that's gotten a lot of the vets off the street. If you've been in the military and you've ever experienced being in the field in any of the services, then you know what it's like to camp out in ill-fitting weather. And I think that bond of just looking out for yourself, basic survival in the military, is exactly what it's like being homeless. It's a stretch. It's a look out for survival. You know, you don't have people shooting at you, but you still got to eat. You still got to have a place to get out of the rain.
Now, a few questions on your anti-war efforts.
Sure.
I know you and others in Grand Junction protested the Iraq War. How would you compare what's going on in Gaza to that historical event?
Well, I would say that it actually came together quicker and larger than we had. We had a lot of time when we were 3 people, 4 or 5 people, out there with signs on 12th and North. And every now and then somebody honked their horn, you get your energy, your psych spirits up, and then they're flipping you off just so they can get your attention.
Let me just make the question a little more specific.
Okay.
Regarding the issue of freedom of speech,
Oh, yes.
how would you compare protests against the Iraq War versus protests in favor of the Palestinians?
Well, the Clash have an old song in which they say, "You have the right to free speech, just as long as you're not dumb enough to actually try it." And so freedom of speech is a psychological feeling as well, because at the time of the original war, they came out with the Patriot Act. And Edward Snowden revealed that the Patriot Act was spying on everybody. It used to be kind of chic in the radical area to say, "Oh, my phone is tapped." Well, everybody's phone is tapped. All your communications are tapped. Snail mail, they'll still go through, texts, Facebook pages, your Google searches. There's a lot of surveillance that is going on to keep you from speaking freely. And now it's interesting to me to see how when the Democrats were in office, they complained about things and the Republicans called them cancel culture. Well, now that the Republicans are in and they don't want anyone talking about Israel, they're the counterculture. And so we're bobbing back and forth. In the meantime, our freedom of speech is only as good as you use it to be. If you don't use your free speech, you're really missing out on a lot of life.
What about in terms of the support within the community? During the time that you were protesting the Iraq War in Grand Junction, how widespread was the support for what you were doing?
Well, it started out with the Afghani war, and that really didn't get a whole lot of traction. But before the Iraq war broke out, there were demonstrations all around the world at that point in time.
It's probably a hard question to answer. I apologize for that, but it seems like we're getting, as you know, there's a small group of us that are protesting the genocide in Gaza and in the West Bank on the corner of 12th and North Street every other Saturday. And we're getting more and more support for what we're doing, and we've been doing this for about a year. So I was just wondering, during the time that you were protesting the Iraq War, did it go that way? Did you first face overwhelming opposition, and then slowly more and more people realized that you were doing the right thing and picked up a lot more support?
Support our troops.
Within Grand Junction is what I have in mind here.
Yeah, support our troops. If you ain't with us, you're against us.
Right.
There was an awful lot of negative pressure that came. We stuck with it on the anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, and every year it was a commemorative event. We would have music, speakers, demonstrations, a march, and we would have crosses painted on white that were like made from paint sticks, but painted real nicely white. Mm-hmm. And they would have the name of the soldier, where he was killed, and his age. And every year people saw that grow. We had one guy that did it just as a labor of love, but we didn't just throw them in the ground, we laid them out like they were in neatly rowed cemeteries to be respectful. And so by the time we got to the end, we were getting large groups of people. Mm. Interesting. When Obama came into office, everybody dropped it. Not everybody that we were working with, but the public at large said, "Oh, yeah, there's no need for it." And he took us from 2 wars to 7. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned that on the corner of 12th and North every other Saturday, there is a rally in support of Palestinians. Not many people show up, despite the fact that we have been doing this for a little over a year. Why do you think there is such little visible effort to end the genocide in Gaza?
Well, Israel is the third rail of politics. People really underestimate just how powerful AIPAC is, the American Israeli Political Affairs Committee. It's in the media. They control social media. This isn't me just saying Jews do this, Jews do that, because there are more Christian Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists by far. And so you have people over here that were raised that they're going to, they have it in their mind, they're going to bring about the Armageddon. And it's kind of funny at the end times with the Christian Zionists are convinced that when the Messiah comes again, that all the Jews will die. And the Jews are thinking when the Messiah comes, all the Christians will die. And yet they're working together. It is a real problem. I mean, they have people that have been fired for speaking out about Israel, people beaten up at rallies, and so it does happen. But yeah, that whole Christian Zionist is a lot of money.
After Vietnam, after Iraq, after Libya, did you ever think we would see yet again such American involvement in the massive slaughter of human lives as is happening in Gaza and in the West Bank right now?
I say Gaza is almost incomprehensible on a basic level. The scale of it is devastating. You know, Gaza is basically the size of Philadelphia, and they've used more bombs there than they have in World War II. All the Western bombs. I think that there'll never be another war. You got to go back to Eisenhower. Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex, unwarranted influence in the halls of Congress, and profit-driven war. And JFK, among many theories about why he was murdered, was he didn't want to escalate in Vietnam. He didn't want to be in a Cold War with, especially after meeting with Khrushchev. And they shot him.
Let's turn to environmental issues. What was the most important lesson you learned from your work in protecting Bangs Canyon?
Well, Bangs Canyon is about a 50,000 acre huge parcel of land just southwest of the city. Down in the canyon, there's a riparian area, and there's a rare local plant, Australagus, that I was looking for so I could GPS and map out an area of critical environmental concern. What I learned was don't ever take for granted that you're going to get fair representation with the BLM, because we had people in there. We had one person for mining, one person for ranching, one person for farming, one person for motorcycles, one for ATVs, one for four-wheel drive Jeeps, everything. And then me. And I was the sole, foot-powered person that we had. It was something that I would love to be able to say that I saved 59,000 acres, but I was able to shape the way it is used now. It's land very close to the city, and we were able to get them to block off some of the damaging trails and have some signage on where the trails you can use are going. But we got the canyon down below, Rough Canyon, with the riparian area, closed off to anything but foot traffic. Something else I didn't know, and this will anger some people, I think, at me for bringing it up. In an environmental impact study, there's motorized and mechanized. And motorized, everybody understands what that is. Mechanized is a bicycle. And like it or not, bikes can do an awful lot of trail damage. And those people were not necessarily interested in maintaining the health of the area. They were just all access. And so I would learn that there's lots of good spaces that are worth hanging on to. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the possible. And remember, like I said earlier, you got to show up. I went there for a year and a half, and it was finally a good undertaking.
Yeah. How do you feel about grazing on public lands? And what do you think should be done about it? Do you support stopping all grazing on public lands?
Well, I have to look at all grazing because there may be some areas that are more suited for that than what we see out west. Out west, you see a lot of overgrown, trampled down habitat that they move cattle off of because there's nothing left for them to forage. And with grazing, you have a charge that you have to pay each animal for each animal you month that you have grazed. I think it's $1.13. So you can feed a cow for $1.13 on the governor's back, but you can't feed yourself much of anything for $1. Maybe a candy bar if you got a small one.
It has been nearly 2 years since wolves were reintroduced to Colorado, and most ranchers, sport hunters, and outfitters seem to be still very strongly against wolves. Do you think this divide can be healed? And do you have any suggestions for doing so?
Well, I think a lot of field contact is in order. I think having people do both, have some of the bureaucrats come out to like Moffat County or something and visit and talk to some of the ranchers in person. Pandemic taught me there's no substitute for human contact. Can't do that over the phone. There's some things you have to be there for. And they can invite people out to Denver and talk about what their plans are with it. I support the reintroduction of the wolf wholeheartedly. I think that Yellowstone Valley is probably one of the best examples of how they restore ecosystems. A lot of times when you have wolves, they're in competition with coyotes. Coyotes kill a lot of animals to eat, more just as much as a wolf, but you get a pack of them. But they get under control. The chronic waste and disease sheep or deer get eaten. You know, the slow, the crippled, it builds the herd up. And I think that many of the times we're talking about a wolf attack, a lot of them are questionable, at say the least. Dogs kill a lot more livestock than any other animal. But with the wolf, you're going to see most, if not all, of the animal eaten. You're not just going to see an animal that got hamstrung and left. if a wolf pack got it, there's not going to be much of anything left. If it was a pack of coyotes, you'd see the same thing. So it'd be difficult to pin it down. I guess they triangulate them with their GPS collars, and they can tell if they've been in the area. But yeah, I think reintroducing the moose to the mesa and wolves in the western part of the state was pretty healthy steps.
It has been argued by many wise individuals that there is such a thing as biophilia, or an innate love for nature. Do you believe in biophilia? And if so, how would you explain our current situation in which we are facing a global sixth extinction, yet there is so much apathy and too little empathy and sorrow for the wild world we are losing?
Well, I think that that's very true. We're in the middle of the sixth great extinction. I think instead of biophilia, our problem is technophilia. And people are using their phones, their tablets, they're texting while driving, having conversations that you would normally have in person. I've seen people text each other in the same room. And so biophilia, I think, is probably in some extent in everybody. Most everybody can feel when you go into a room with a lot of nice houseplants. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you feel comfortable in it. And that's just one example. When you get out and you're not used to stars in the sky because you live under street lamps, there's a sense of wonder, because there's just so many. And as you can see, the Milky Way, it's very beguiling. So I think that biophilia can be enhanced. I think it's innate. I think technophilia is not. I think we're barking up the wrong tree with that.
Last year, the people of Colorado were given the opportunity to stop the trophy hunting of mountain lions and the trapping of bobcats, but they voted not to do so. Would you agree that capitalism, in which all of life is increasingly reduced to exchange relationships, you do for me and I will do for you, has so eroded our inherent moral conscience and biological sensibilities that it is going to be very difficult for us as a species to avert total ecological disaster? Do you see a way forward?
Narrow it down for me.
Getting around or solving the problem of the sixth extinction and finding a way to avert ecological disaster while we're living in a capitalist society in which all human relationships are commodified and reduced to exchange relationships. How do we get out of that trap, so to speak?
Capitalism is a trap. I think capitalism means everything's for sale, and at my price, and you decide what you want to pay. And when you get down to how many wolves per acre we need to have, that shouldn't be a ledger issue. That should be a chart with how much habitat they need. I think that capitalism we're in the late stages in the end of capitalism right now. And unfortunately, we don't have anything in place right now to plug in. I think it's naive to think you can just come up with a better idea and everyone's going to run towards you for salvation. Do what's right in front of you. That's the best thing to do. Deal with your neighborhood, your neighbors, your family, your town, everything. Just the more localized that you can do it, even your food if you can. All those are pay cash. If you want to get off the system, shut your phone down. Basically, something's going to occur. It'll probably be warlords is my concern. Once the U.S. falls apart, I think there's going to be warlords in different regions, and that'll be more of a barter-like economy, kind of Mad Maxian. Don't think that's inevitable, but I can see that coming if we don't have an alternative.
A lot of progressives and leftists think that building a militant labor union in America is the best way for overcoming capitalism. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm a member of the Wobblies. I'm International Workers of the World, so there is one big union. It's the Wobblies that got us the 40-hour work week, workers' comp, benefits, safe working conditions. A lot of the stuff that we take for the weekend, they created the weekend. People were always working 60, 70 hours a week, and the unions, the Wobblies, got a lot of that done. And there was a lot of violence that was geared towards eradicating the Wobblies. But now they're back, and they're organizing in Denver. Denver's got a pretty active, there's only a handful of Wobblies on the western slope, but Denver has been able to have different restaurants and other service industries unionize. So they're still pretty active, and that's encouraging.
That is. It seems that the struggles for social justice and equality should be situated in the greater context of securing a healthy and wild earth. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah. I think in your house, people don't just smoke cigarettes and throw them on the ground or crush up a beer can and toss it in the corner. You take care of your house because you have to live there. I think an awful lot of this does come down to education. We need to have, for example, we had an ecology club when I was in junior high. And ecology is basically kind of an intro to how systems interrelate. And we were learning about how phosphates got into the water and killed fish. We're learning about lead paint. We're learning about a lot of stuff that none of us had any idea about. And it totally changed me, woke me up. I think education for the outdoors really needs to take place outdoors. Even if you're in a downtown school, you need to get out on the grass or on picnic tables. And don't be afraid, winter, spring, summer. You can definitely benefit from being outdoors, trying to understand the outdoors and how important it is when, if you're downtown and you're breathing in clean air and a truck goes by and you can smell the truck. That's like, well, how about if they did that in your house? How would you feel if you had a gas pipe stuck in your house? And try to enlarge the world they have, their view. It's kind of like it gets bigger and bigger, until finally you have our star, the sun.
The purpose of this radio show is to raise awareness concerning the value of big wilderness and abundant wildlife. Maybe by learning to admire and respect wild animals in wild places, we can evolve a new kind of humanism in which we respect and cooperate with one another. Henry David Thoreau said, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." And John Muir said, "The clearest way into the universe is through a forest wilderness." Your response?
Well, those are some heavy hitters. Forest wilderness is something that I think about. There's a lot of wilderness that is rock and ice, and it's designed for climbers and skiers and people that are bagging at 14,000 peaks. But all the wilderness areas is rock and ice. We need wilderness areas of stuff that's just healthy, like a big tract of prairie, like several states worth of short grass and mixed grass prairie. We need all of that.
I want to return to wolves because I see them, much like immigrants, homeless veterans, and children of poor families, as being persecuted and punished simply for striving towards a decent life. Do you see any parallels between the way society treats wolves and mountain lions and the way it treats marginalized human communities?
Well, I think there's an element of fear to a lot of that. People have been taught to be afraid of wolves. They've been taught to be afraid of mountain lions and predators. There's people that are taught to be fearful of homeless people, of outcasts, of people that might not be up to your financial stuff. And so it does happen.
What does it reveal about our society that we punish living beings merely for existing?
Oh, it gets me all the time. Little things that people don't know about being homeless. You're responsible for everything. If you're having a bad day, you're having an argument, it's out in public. If the police are not necessarily going to come help you, you're pretty marginalized. And when you have nowhere to go, it's the same thing as people are talking about wolves being reintroduced. Well, they show up in places they aren't supposed to be. People would have them, and they're supposed to be wherever they want, wherever they can be. But people feel fearful of them. Like I said, they fearful of homeless people. Probably like that, I would say.
I watched a YouTube documentary called Cowspiracy, and it makes a powerful case for veganism. I personally don't think this is a complete solution because freeing the land from cattle and sheep would not stop housing developments, roads, mining, logging, and so on. But it does set a high ethical standard that I believe we should all aspire to. What do you think of veganism?
Well, I went through a phase where I was vegetarian, lacto-ovo vegetarian, then vegan, and then gradually got back into eating some meat. I think that one problem with the vegan food is the really good recipes never make it out of the kitchen. There's really ways you can make gourmet vegan meals that are every bit as delectable as any French dish you would have or any Italian dish you would have. And so it's a lot cheaper too to be vegan. Doesn't seem like it, but most of the foods you're getting are fresh or dried lentils, brown rice. You're eating healthier. I think if people really understood the food chain we have, we're talking about out here cows trampling the ecosystem and getting poop and denuding the ground. Well, that's only like about a little less than 10% of beef is publicly farmed. The rest of it is feedlots. And if you want to know anything about what feedlots smell like, go to Greeley. And I think a lot of people, if they had to clean up their own mess, their own food, and hunt it, kill it. I used to hunt quite a bit. And it's a more honest way of getting meat. You aren't buying into the whole transportation system, the refrigeration system, the plastic used to wrap it, all the fuel. If you're getting on a jet in Cleveland and going to Alaska to shoot something, that's not what I'm talking about. But you can't always hunt. You can always garden.
This may be our last question, because
Okay.
I can see that we're coming upon 1 hour. Eventually, if we survive and truly progress as a species, I personally don't believe there should be any domesticated animals, with the possible exception of the dog, who probably should also be allowed to become a wolf again. But some argue that GMOs extend this domestication into the very code of genetic life itself. Talk about GMOs in the time remaining.
I was back in Iowa in the early 90s, and that is a very industrialized state. The industry is farming, so it's misleading looking. It doesn't look industrialized, but fence row to fence row is all going to corn, soybeans, and hogs. They came up with a product called Roundup Ready corn when I was living back there. And it was a system that they had where they would sell you genetically modified corn seed that could withstand Roundup. The Roundup you sprayed on the corn would kill everything but the Roundup. And you aren't allowed to save the seeds, and so you're dependent on that. And farms are getting pollinated with the seeds, even though they don't want it to spread for profit purposes. It's contaminating farm fields when the pollen is pollinating other fields of just regular corn. They slip GMOs into spices first. That was where they figured they'd be able to get their toe in the door. GMOs are really troublesome to me because of the DNA implications of bringing on mutations. Also, I think that Impossible Burger and Beyond Beef are problematic to me because they're built up off of factory farming. So you're giving one package problem for another package problem. I think that if you're going to go vegetarian or vegan, don't get like a tofu hot dog. Make tofu. Don't get something that reminds you of meat because you're looking to change your palate. And so with the GMOs, you have to remember that they're not always going to be tasting different. But I can give you a real quick deal. Genetically modified bananas don't get brown, they get spotted. I don't know if you've noticed that.
No.
Yeah, next time you see bananas getting old, see if they get spotted, and that means they've been through the thresher.
Well, thank you, Eric, and thanks for all the good work you've done in Grand Junction. You've been listening to Wild Earth Conversations on KWSI 100.3 radio in Grand Junction. More conversations in this series are available at kwsiradio.org or on KWSI's YouTube channel. If you have comments or questions about the show, or if you would like to be a guest, then send me an email at wildearthconversations@kwsiradio.org. Please include a phone number. Thank you.